At 82 years old, after a lifetime of work and raising a family, you hope for a quiet life. You hope for warmth, not warnings. But when I called my daughter to ask if I could stay for Christmas, her reply froze me to the bone. "It's a family-only thing, Dad." That's when my world started to unravel. I soon discovered she had secretly and systematically drained my life savings, stealing over $750,000 from me. But she underestimated her old man. My revenge, served cold at her lavish Christmas dinner in Scottsdale, would leave them with absolutely nothing. Before we dive into the details of this nightmare, I'd love to know where you're all tuning in from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Drop your city or country in the comments, and maybe let me know what time it is where you are. Okay, let's get into it. The whole thing started quietly, deceptively, on a gray Tuesday in late November. The Chicago wind was already starting to bite, a familiar, mournful howl that rattled the windows of my small apartment. I was settled in my favorite worn leather recliner, the one piece of furniture I insisted on keeping when my wife, Helen, passed, and I sold the family home 5 years ago. It was my throne and my lifeboat in the quiet sea of my retirement. Life had become a predictable, steady rhythm of crossword puzzles, lukewarm coffee, and the weekly meetings at the local VFW post where I could still feel like a part of something. Then my daughter Brenda called. That wasn't unusual, but her tone was. "Dad, I'm coming to visit," she'd announced, not asked, her voice carrying a strange, syrupy sweetness over the line from Arizona. "I've been so worried about you rattling around in that big apartment all by yourself. I just need to see you." A week later, she was there, a whirlwind of manufactured concern. She arrived from Scottsdale not with the warmth I craved, but with a suitcase full of cleaning supplies and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. For 3 full days, she scrubbed my kitchen until it gleamed, reorganized my pantry with an almost manic energy, and cooked my favorite meals, all while chattering endlessly about her busy, important life. It felt staged, but I was so starved for company, for the illusion of family, that I pushed the feeling down. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel quite so alone. I let myself believe this was real. I thought, maybe she finally gets it. Maybe she finally understands how much I miss her mother, how quiet the silence can be when you're the only one left to hear it. On the last afternoon of her visit, she sat me down at the kitchen table. The scent of bleach and lemon polish still hung heavy in the air, a sterile smell that felt wrong in my lived-in home. She pulled a thick manila folder from her designer handbag, the kind that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. "Dad," she said, her voice smooth as silk and her hand covering mine. Her touch felt cold. "I had my lawyer draw up some papers. It's just routine stuff, updating your will and establishing a medical power of attorney. Just in case. It'll make things easier for everyone if something happens." She fanned the pages out before me, a dizzying sea of fine print and legal jargon. "It just gives me the ability to pay your bills and talk to your doctors if you can't. It's standard procedure for someone your age." I'm not a fool. I ran a procurement department at a steel company for 40 years. I've read more contracts than she's had hot dinners. But looking at my only child, seeing what I desperately wanted to believe was genuine love and concern in her eyes, my defenses crumbled. I was tired, I was lonely, and I wanted, more than anything, to believe my daughter cared. So I signed where she pointed, my old arthritic hand scratching out a signature on page after page. While she was packing to leave, I saw her through the window talking to my neighbor, Betty from 3B. Her face was a mask of worried sympathy, her hands gesturing dramatically towards my apartment. Betty was nodding, her own face filled with pity. At the time, I thought Brenda was just telling her how much she worries about her old dad. I had no idea she was laying the foundation for my destruction, poisoning the well, and painting a picture of me as a confused, incompetent old man who couldn't be trusted. That signature, I'd soon learn, wasn't a key to protect me. It was the key to my cage, and she had just locked the door from the outside, leaving me to rot. The 2 weeks that followed Brenda's visit were filled with a renewed, fragile sense of hope. The apartment felt less empty, the lingering scent of her perfume a ghostly reminder of her presence. Her brief, intense visit had reminded me of what it was like to have family around, and it stoked a small, flickering fire in my heart for the upcoming holidays. Christmas was always Helen's favorite time of year. She would spend weeks decorating, humming carols off key, filling our home with the scent of pine and cinnamon and love. This would be the fifth Christmas without her, and the thought of spending it alone, just me and the blaring television for company, was a weight I felt I couldn't bear this year. So, I decided to be proactive. I was still riding the wave of false hope from her visit. I picked up the phone, my heart thumping with a nervous, almost childish excitement. I let myself picture it all. The warm Arizona sun on my old bones, the sound of my granddaughter Chloe's laughter echoing through their big house, the simple feeling of being part of a family again, even if it was just for a little while. I just wanted a seat at the table. That's all. The phone rang twice before Brenda picked up, her voice bright and impossibly busy, the sound of a bustling office in the background. "Hi, Dad, what's up?" she said, the words clipped and efficient. "Hello, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, to inject a casual warmth I didn't feel. "I was just calling about Christmas. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I was hoping, well, I'd really like to fly out to Scottsdale and spend the holiday with you all. It's been too long." There was a pause. It wasn't a long one, but in that sliver of silence, I felt the temperature drop. It was a heavy, loaded silence filled with something I couldn't quite name but recognized as dread. It was the kind of silence that precedes bad news, the deep breath before the plunge. "Oh, Dad," she said, and her voice shifted instantly. It was the voice she used with difficult clients, patronizingly sweet, professionally detached, and utterly firm. "Well, it's a family-only thing this year," she said, the words tumbling out as if she'd rehearsed them, polished them until they were smooth and sharp. My mind reeled, struggling to process the phrase. Family only? What did that even mean? Before I could form the question, she continued, her voice rushing to fill the void. "Kevin's parents are flying in from San Diego, and his sister is coming with her kids. The house is just going to be bursting at the seams. We wouldn't have a spare inch of room. I'm so sorry." The excuse was so flimsy, so transparently false. It was insulting. Their house was a 5-bedroom monstrosity in the hills of Scottsdale, a palace I'd helped them with the down payment on. I'd spent an entire summer helping Kevin renovate the guest suite, the very suite that apparently had no room for me. I was speechless. I, her father, the man who paid for her college education, who walked her down the aisle, who bailed her and her husband out of a mountain of debt not once, but twice, was not considered family enough for a family-only Christmas. "I see," I managed to say, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. My throat was tight. "Great, I knew you'd understand," she chirped, the relief in her voice disgustingly palpable. "Look, I've got to run. A client is waiting. We'll talk soon. Love you." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there, holding the phone to my ear, listening to the hollow buzz of the dial tone. Outside my window, my neighbors, the Hendersons, were putting up their Christmas lights, their 2 teenage kids laughing as they untangled the wires. A happy, normal family. The irony was a physical pain in my chest. I had given my daughter everything, and in return, she had given me a closed door, a polite dismissal. The cold from the Chicago wind outside had nothing on the Arctic chill that was seeping into my bones. That phone call was a declaration. It wasn't just a rejection. It was an erasure. And as I sat there in the growing darkness, the festive lights from across the street mocking me, I realized that this cruel dismissal was only a symptom of a much deeper, more sinister disease that was about to consume my entire life. For a few days, I let the hurt fester. I wallowed in it. I sat in my recliner, replaying that phone call in my head until the words lost all meaning and became just a cruel mantra of rejection. I tried to reason with myself, to find excuses for her. Maybe Brenda was just stressed. Maybe Kevin's family was difficult. Maybe the house really was full. But no matter how many justifications I tried to construct, that cold, dismissive tone in her voice echoed in my mind, tearing down every flimsy defense I built. The feeling that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong wouldn't go away. It was a persistent, nagging itch in the back of my mind, a splinter I couldn't quite reach. The first concrete clue, the first tangible piece of the nightmare to come, fell into my lap by complete accident. It was the 5th of the month, bill-paying day. I performed the routine with the same military precision I'd used for 50 years, a small ritual of control in a life that felt increasingly out of my hands. I logged into my online banking portal, my eyes scanning the familiar lines of debits and credits, and then I saw it. On my main credit card statement, a charge that made me lean closer to the screen, my heart giving a sudden, hard thump. It was for nearly $2,000, $1,987.54 to be exact. It was paid to a company called Powell Vista Properties. I'd never heard of them. The charge was dated 3 months prior, a time when I hadn't made any large purchases, hadn't traveled, hadn't done anything outside my simple loop between my apartment, the grocery store, and the VFW post. My mind started racing. I racked my brain trying to place the name. Nothing. I thought back to Brenda's visit, to the stack of papers that I had so trustingly signed. She had said they were just for paying my bills if I was incapacitated. Had she used my card for something? The amount was too specific, too odd. It wasn't a round number. It felt like a utility bill or a tax payment. I decided not to jump to conclusions. There had to be a logical explanation. My first thought was fraud. Some hacker in a foreign country had gotten my number. It was a comforting thought, in a strange way, because it was an external threat. Before calling the credit card company to report it, I had another thought, a strange, nagging impulse. I thought about Brenda's long-hushed conversation with my neighbor, Betty, in the hallway. The image of Brenda's concerned face and Betty's pitying one flashed in my mind. I picked up the phone and dialed Betty's number. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "Betty, it's Art Miller from across the hall," I said, forcing my voice to sound as casual and neighborly as I could. We chatted for a minute about the miserable weather and her grandkids' latest exploits. Then I steered the conversation. It was so nice having my Brenda visit last month. She seems to have had such a nice long chat with Betty before she left. She worries so much about her old man. Betty's voice warmed immediately, just as I knew it would. "Oh, Art, she's an absolute angel, a wonderful daughter. She worries constantly, it's true. But she was so excited, too. She spent a good 10 minutes telling me all about the magnificent gift you gave them." My hand tightened on the phone until my knuckles were white. "A gift?" I repeated, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. "Yes, the beautiful vacation home right on the water. She said you bought it for the whole family to enjoy, so your lovely granddaughter Chloe could have wonderful memories. What was the name of that place again? Lake Powell, that was it. She showed me pictures on her phone, Art. Absolutely stunning. The water was so blue. You are such a generous man." The world tilted on its axis and spun into a sickening blur. Lake Powell, Powell Vista Properties. The $2,000 charge was almost certainly a property tax payment or a homeowners association fee. It all clicked into place with a horrifying, deafening thud. A gift. She had told my neighbor, my friends, the people I saw every day, that I had gifted them a house. A house I had no knowledge of, a house bought with money that could only have come from one place, my life's savings. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated, cold-blooded theft, wrapped in the guise of a loving gift. She wasn't just stealing from me. She was crafting a narrative, a public story where she was the doting daughter and I was the doting, generous old fool. The phone call about Christmas wasn't just a rejection anymore. It was a strategic move to keep me away, to stop me from discovering the truth. The game had changed. This was no longer about a lonely holiday. It was about the fight for my life.
The revelation about the Lake Powell house was a body blow. It knocked the wind out of me, leaving me gasping in the ruins of my own naivete. But what happened next, just a few days later, showed me the true depth of my daughter's cruelty. It proved that she wasn't just after my money. She was after my mind, my reputation, my very identity. She wanted to erase me, not just from the family Christmas photo, but from my own life. I got a call from a number I knew well. It was John Henderson, a retired Marine colonel and the commander of my local VFW post. John was a straight shooter, a man of unimpeachable honor. We'd served in different eras, he in Vietnam, me in Korea, but we shared a bond forged in a language of duty and respect that civilians rarely understand. His post was my sanctuary, the one place I could go to feel like myself, to be with men who didn't see an old man, but a brother. "Art," he said, and I immediately noticed the unusual hesitation in his normally gruff voice. "Got a minute? I need to talk to you about something a little delicate." "Of course, John. What's on your mind?" I settled back in my recliner, a sense of unease prickling my skin. He cleared his throat, a sound like gravel crunching. "Well, Art, I received a rather unusual phone call yesterday. It was from your daughter, Brenda." Ice flooded my veins. A cold, heavy dread settled in the pit of my stomach. "Oh?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Yeah," he continued, and I could tell he was deeply uncomfortable. "He told me she was calling out of deep concern. She said, well, Art, she said she was worried about you. She told your memory has been failing, that you've been getting confused lately. She mentioned you were making some irresponsible financial decisions, and that she was trying to get a handle on things to protect you from yourself." He paused, and I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "She asked if we, at the post, had noticed any changes in your behavior, if you seemed off. She wanted to know if you were forgetting things or seemed agitated." I had to sit down. I gripped the armrests of my recliner, my knuckles turning white. The sheer, diabolical brilliance of it almost took my breath away. It wasn't enough to steal from me in secret. It wasn't enough to bar me from her home for the holidays. She was actively, maliciously trying to discredit me. She was calling my friends, my brothers in arms, the people whose respect I valued more than almost anything, and painting me as senile. She was systematically dismantling my support system, one poisoned phone call at a time. If my VFW buddies, my most trusted allies, thought I was losing my mind, who would believe me when I told them my daughter was a thief? She was creating a narrative where any action I took to defend myself would be seen as the paranoid ramblings of a demented old man. It was a checkmate move in a game I didn't even know I was playing. She was trying to have me declared incompetent without ever setting foot in a doctor's office or a courtroom. It was the most vicious, cowardly attack I could have ever imagined. I took a deep, shuddering breath, fighting to keep my voice even. "John," I said, my voice shaking with a rage so cold it felt like ice. "What did you tell her?" He said, "I told her you're as sharp as you ever were," and I could hear the steel returning to his voice, the disgust evident. "I told her I beat you in chess 3 times last week, and that your memory of the Chosen Reservoir campaign is better than any book I've ever read. I told her that if she had genuine concerns, she should be a decent human being and talk to you, not go skulking behind your back. I smelled a rat, Art, a damn big one. What in the hell is going on?" The dam broke. I told him everything. The suspicious visit, the papers I'd signed like a fool, the cold rejection for Christmas, the house on Lake Powell. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with his anger. When he finally spoke, his voice was grim. "That manipulative, greedy Art, you need to fight this, and you're not alone in this fight. The boys at the post, we have your back. Whatever you need, you just say the word." Hanging up the phone, the hurt was replaced by a hardening resolve. My daughter had made a critical, fatal mistake. She thought she was isolating a feeble old man. She had no idea she had just declared war on a soldier, and that soldier still had an entire platoon ready to fight alongside him. Now, I have to ask you all, if you were in my shoes at this very moment, what would you have done? After finding out your child was not only stealing from you, but trying to turn your oldest, most trusted friends against you, let me know in the comments. For me, this was the point of no return. This was war. That night, sleep was a stranger. It wouldn't come near me. I sat in my recliner, the familiar leather cool against my skin, while the dark apartment became a mirror of my own bleak thoughts. Brenda's betrayal was a hydra, a mythical beast from the old stories, growing new, more monstrous heads with each revelation. She wasn't just a thief, she was a saboteur, a character assassin, working to destroy my life from the inside out. I felt trapped, a fly caught in a web, spun with my own love and trust, and the spider was getting closer. I felt utterly, completely alone. Just as I was about to be swallowed by a wave of despair so profound it felt like drowning, my phone buzzed on the side table. The screen lit up. It was a text message from an unknown number, but the preview showed just one word. Grandpa? My heart, which had been a leaden weight in my chest, leapt. It had to be Chloe. It was past midnight in Arizona. My fingers trembled as I typed back, my knuckles aching with arthritis and adrenaline. Chloe, is that you, sweetheart? The reply was instant, 3 little dots appearing and disappearing in a frantic dance. Yes. Can I call? Please don't tell Mom. Call me right now, I texted back, my thumb hovering over the screen. Seconds later, the phone rang, a shrill sound in the crushing silence. I snatched it up. Her voice was a small, frightened whisper, barely audible. Grandpa? I'm here, Chloe. I'm right here. What's wrong? Are you okay? I'm fine, she whispered, but I could hear the tremor in her voice, the telltale sign of held-back tears. But I heard Mom and Dad talking, arguing, really, loudly, about you. I held my breath, my entire body tense. What did they say, honey? Tell me everything.
There was a long pause, and I could picture her perfectly, huddled in her bedroom, probably under the covers with a flashlight, the phone pressed tight to her ear. Mom was mad, really mad. She was yelling about something you did. She said you called Aunt Betty? That's what she calls your neighbor. And Dad was panicking. He was pacing back and forth, and he said, "He knows, Brenda. He's figuring it out. I told you this was a mistake." So Betty, in her innocent, gossipy way, had called Brenda to gush about her wonderful gift. The web was starting to vibrate, and the spider knew the fly was struggling. What else, Chloe? What did your mother say? Mom said it doesn't matter if you know. Chloe's voice cracked, and a single sob escaped. She said it's too late for him to do anything. I have power of attorney over everything. He can't even write a check without my approval now. Grandpa, what's power of attorney? The phrase hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Power of attorney. That's what those papers were. Not just some simple medical directive. It was a total surrender of my autonomy, my independence, my life. It's a legal document, sweetheart, I said, fighting to keep the horror out of my voice for her sake. There's more, she said, her voice dropping even lower, as if she was afraid the walls themselves were listening. Mom was talking about selling the house at Lake Powell right away and the old condo in Naples, the one Grandma Helen loves so much. She said they needed to liquidate your assets before you could complicate things. Grandpa, what does that mean? What are they doing? The Naples condo. Helen and I had bought that little place on the Gulf Coast decades ago with the first real bonus I ever received. It wasn't worth a fortune, but it was filled with memories of sunshine and laughter and her. The thought of Brenda's greedy, grasping hands on it, selling it off like some junk asset to fund her lavish lifestyle, made me physically sick. She was erasing my history, erasing Helen's memory,
all for a payday. Grandpa? Chloe whispered, her voice trembling now with the fear that broke my heart. You're not going to put you somewhere, are you? Mom was on the phone with some place called Sunshine Meadows last week. She was asking about their memory care unit. Sunshine Meadows. It sounded like a five-star prison. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with horrifying, absolute clarity. The fake concern, the call to my VFW commander, the power of attorney. It was a systematic, step-by-step plan to have me declared incompetent, seize every last asset I owned, and then lock me away where I couldn't fight back. My own daughter was planning to bury me alive. The next morning, I didn't just wake up. I was launched into the day by a surge of pure, unadulterated adrenaline and a cold fury that burned away all the fog of despair. Sleep had been a fitful, nightmare-ridden affair, but with the first gray light of dawn, my purpose became crystal clear. Despair was a luxury I could no longer afford. Chloe's call had been a gift, a desperate warning flare in the dead of night. It had illuminated the full scope of the battlefield, and it had shown me that I wasn't just fighting for my money anymore. I was fighting for my freedom and for her. I spent an hour online, my fingers, usually stiff with arthritis, flying across the keyboard with a newfound urgency. I bypassed the local, small-time lawyers. I needed a shark. I found the number for David Chen, a lawyer whose firm, Chen & Associates, had handled complex corporate litigation for my old steel company years ago. I remembered David as a young, razor-sharp attorney who could dissect a contract and find the jugular on any legal argument. He was brilliant, aggressive, and had the reputation of a bulldog who never let go. I prayed he was still in practice. His secretary, a polite but firm woman, tried to schedule me for an appointment next week. "I'm afraid Mr. Chen is booked solid," she said. "Ma'am," I said, my voice low and steady, "please tell him that Arthur Miller is on the line from North American Steel. Tell him it's a code red." It was a term we used for a catastrophic failure at the plant. She put me on hold. 30 seconds later, his voice, just as I remembered it, calm, measured, and radiating intelligence, came on the line. "It's Ad Miller. It's been a long time. I hope you're calling for a social catch-up, but your tone and your message tells me otherwise." "David," I said, my voice grim, "I'm in a hell of a mess, and I think I've been the victim of a massive, systematic fraud. I need to see you. Today." There was a brief pause. "I have a cancellation at 3 o'clock. Be here." 3 hours later, I was sitting in a plush leather chair opposite his polished mahogany desk in a downtown Chicago skyscraper. The view of Lake Michigan, a vast expanse of churning gray water, was stunning, but I saw none of it. I laid everything out for him, my voice a low, angry monotone. I told him about Brenda's visit, the papers I foolishly signed, the cold rejection for Christmas, the discovery of the Lake Powell house, the insidious call from my VFW commander, and finally Chloe's terrified whispered warnings from the night before. I had already called my bank and had them email over copies of the documents Brenda had filed with them. David listened without interruption, his hands steepled in front of him, his face a mask of professional neutrality. But as I spoke, I saw a muscle begin to twitch in his jaw, a telltale sign of his growing anger. When he finished, he was silent for a full minute, his eyes scanning the documents on his computer screen, his brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, he took off his glasses, polished them slowly with a silk cloth, and looked at me, his expression grim. "Art," he said slowly, his voice laced with a controlled, cold anger that was far more terrifying than any shouting would have been. He turned his monitor towards me. "These aren't just standard power of attorney documents. This is a comprehensive, durable, and immediate power of attorney.
The moment you signed this, your daughter was granted complete and total control over your entire financial life. She can sell your property, drain your bank accounts, take out loans in your name, all without your consent or knowledge. The room felt suddenly cold, the air thin. But the medical papers, I started, my voice barely a whisper.
Or worse, he cut me off, his voice sharp. He pointed to another document on the screen. This is a healthcare directive combined with a durable power of attorney for healthcare. Art, this gives her the authority to make any and all medical decisions on your behalf. And this clause here, he tapped the screen with his pen, the click echoing in the silent office. This specifically gives her the power to admit you to a long-term care facility even against your will, if she can get a single doctor to agree with her assessment of your mental state. Her call to your VFW commander wasn't just slander, it was her laying the groundwork to have you committed. This was a coup, Art, a hostile takeover of your life. The full, horrifying weight of it all crashed down on me. It was a complete, systematic plan to erase me from the world. I looked at David, my last hope. "Can we fight this?" I asked, my voice cracking. David leaned forward, his dark eyes glinting with a fierce, predatory light. "Fight this, Art? We're not going to fight it. We are going to dismantle it. We are going to take back every single thing she has stolen from you. And then," he said, a thin, dangerous smile touching his lips, "we are going to burn her world to the ground." The fire in David Chen's eyes was exactly what I needed. It was a torch in the darkness, and it extinguished the last vestiges of my fear, leaving only a cold, hard resolve in its place. For the next 4 hours, his opulent office with its panoramic view of the city became a war room. We didn't just talk. We strategized, we planned, and we built the legal framework for my counteroffensive. "First things first," David said, pulling out a yellow legal pad and starting a numbered list with a decisive slash of his pen. "We need to invalidate that power of attorney immediately. It's the head of the snake. I will draft a revocation of power of attorney. It will be clear, concise, and legally ironclad. We will have it notarized and filed with the Cook County Clerk's office first thing tomorrow morning. Simultaneously, we will send a legally binding notice via certified mail and fax to every financial institution you have an account with, your banks, your brokerage firm, your credit card companies. We will inform them that Brenda Miller's authority is revoked and that any transaction she attempts from this moment forward is to be considered fraudulent and will be prosecuted." "What about the money she's already taken?" I asked, the thought of the $750,000 for the Lake Powell house a bitter taste in my mouth. "We go after it, all of it," he said without a flicker of hesitation. "I'll have my forensic accounting team start tracing the money trail this afternoon. We'll get the wire transfer records. We'll find out exactly how she moved the funds from your accounts to the escrow company in Arizona. Given that she used a fraudulently obtained power of attorney to access your accounts, that entire transaction is illegal. We will file a civil lawsuit in Arizona demanding the immediate return of the property title to you or full restitution of the $750,000 plus damages and all associated legal fees." He paused, his gaze intense. "I need you to be prepared for that, Art. She will fight back. She will try to use the narrative she's already built, that you're confused and incompetent. We need to preemptively destroy that argument before she can even make it." And so we began to build my fortress of sanity. The second part of the plan was to gather an arsenal of evidence. I would go to my longtime physician, Dr. Evans, that very afternoon for a full physical and a comprehensive cognitive assessment. David would draft a formal request for a detailed letter from the doctor confirming my mental competency to be written on his official letterhead.
He would also take a sworn, videotaped affidavit from my VFW commander, John Henderson, detailing Brenda's manipulative phone call and his personal, unequivocal assessment of my sharp mind and leadership at the post. We'll get affidavits from 2 or 3 other members as well, David added. We'll create a chorus of character witnesses she cannot possibly refute. Now for the most important part, David said, his voice lowering, becoming more serious. Protecting what's left, and more importantly, protecting your granddaughter. He explained the concept of an irrevocable trust, a legal entity that would be like a vault for my assets. We will create the Chloe Miller Educational and Life Trust. We will draft the documents today. We will transfer all your remaining liquid assets and properties, including your apartment and the Naples condo, into this trust. You will be the primary trustee for as long as you live, giving you full control. But upon your passing, a corporate trustee that I designate, an impartial third party, will take over. Chloe will be the sole beneficiary. He looked at me intently, making sure I understood the power of this move. Here's the brilliant part, Art. Once your assets are in this trust, they are legally no longer yours. They belong to the trust. Brenda cannot touch them, even with a fraudulent power of attorney. We are building a legal firewall around your life savings. The trust will have strict conditions, all laid out by you. The funds can be used for Chloe's education, a down payment on a home, or to start a business. But her parents will have zero control. They can't influence her decisions or access a single cent. I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost made me dizzy. Chloe would be safe. My legacy, Helen's legacy, would be protected from the vultures. I thought of something else, a final crucial piece of the puzzle. David, I said, can we add a clause? A morality clause? Something with teeth? David's lips curved into a thin, sharp smile. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator. I was hoping you'd say that. We will add a specific clause stating that if Brenda or Kevin ever challenge your competency in court, file for conservatorship, or attempt to interfere with your relationship with Chloe in any way, they will be immediately and permanently disinherited from any potential future proceeds from your estate. We will give them nothing, not even a memory. Everything was falling into place. The legal machinery was turning, and it was now aimed directly at my daughter. I felt the balance of power shifting for the first time since this nightmare had begun. But there was one last thing. David, I asked, can we fight this? He leaned forward in his chair, tapping his gold pen on the polished desk. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. Oh, you are absolutely going to Scottsdale for Christmas, Art. In fact, I'm coming with you. We're going to deliver our own Christmas gift. There's nothing quite like serving legal papers during dessert. Leaving David's office that evening, the Chicago skyline glittered like a field of scattered diamonds against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. For the first time in weeks, it didn't seem cold or indifferent. It seemed like a city of possibilities, a landscape of towering strength. The fear that had been my constant, suffocating companion was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose so sharp and clear it felt like a weapon in my hand. I was no longer a victim waiting for the next blow to fall. I was a general preparing for a decisive battle, and I finally had my marching orders.
The next 7 days were a blur of focused, relentless activity. Every action was a deliberate step in David's meticulously crafted plan, a series of strategic moves on the chessboard. The morning after our meeting, I met David at a notary's office downtown. The air was crisp and biting. I signed the revocation of power of attorney, the pen feeling solid and powerful in my hand. Each letter of my signature felt like a reclamation of my independence, a defiant scrawl against my daughter's treachery. David, ever efficient, had a courier waiting. The document was filed with the county clerk's office before lunch. My mid-afternoon, faxes and certified letters were streaming out from his office to my banks, my brokerage firm, and my credit card companies, officially and legally cutting Brenda off at the knees. The fortress walls were going up, stone by heavy stone.
Next, I went to see Dr. Evans, my physician for the last 20 years. He was a kind, no-nonsense man who had seen me through the worst of my grief after Helen died. I didn't tell him the whole sordid story, just that I was having some family disputes regarding my estate and needed to formally document my health status for legal reasons. He understood immediately, his eyes filled with a sad wisdom. He put me through a battery of tests: memory recall, complex problem solving, abstract reasoning. He drew my blood, checked my heart, listened to my lungs. At the end of it all, he clapped me on the shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. "Art," he said with a warm smile, "you're healthier than most of my 60-year-old patients. Your mind is as sharp as a tack. I'll have my office draft a letter for your lawyer that says exactly that, and I'll be happy to testify to it in court if needed." Another brick in the wall, solid and unshakable. My visit to the VFW post was different. It wasn't about legalities, it was about brotherhood. I sat down with John Henderson and 2 other trusted board members in the quiet, wood-paneled back room. Surrounded by the scent of old beer and patriotism, I told them everything. The shame I had expected to feel was replaced by their quiet, simmering anger on my behalf. These were men who understood betrayal. John's sworn videotaped affidavit was powerful, his words precise and damning. He detailed not only Brenda's insidious call, but also cited specific, recent examples of my leadership and clear-headedness at the post. They were my character witnesses, an unimpeachable chorus of support from men of honor. David, meanwhile, was a force of nature. His team worked with the speed and precision of a special forces unit. His forensic accountants had already found the wire transfer for $750,000 from my savings account to an escrow company in Arizona. The paper trail was clean, direct, and devastatingly clear. He had drafted the civil lawsuit, prepared the cease and desist orders, and finalized the complex creation of the Chloe Miller Irrevocable Trust. All the pieces were in place, every weapon cleaned and loaded. On the final day, I packed a small suitcase. It felt strange. I wasn't packing holiday clothes, but my best dark suit, freshly polished shoes, and a tie Helen had given me. My briefcase was heavy, not with gifts, but with multiple, neatly labeled copies of every legal document David had prepared. As I booked my flight to Phoenix, I felt a strange sense of calm descend over me. The rage was still there, a cold, hard ember in my chest, but it was controlled burn now, fueling my resolve, not consuming me. Brenda had wanted me to be a ghost at her holiday feast, invisible, silent, and forgotten. She was about to find out that ghosts can come back to haunt you, and this one was bringing hell with him. When my plane took off from O'Hare, leaving the gray, frozen landscape of Chicago behind, I wasn't flying into a family Christmas. I was flying into a reckoning. Scottsdale in December was a different world, a different planet. The air was crisp and cool, but the sky was a brilliant, cloudless, impossible blue. Palm trees, their fronds rustling in the gentle breeze, stood like sentinels up and down the manicured streets, their trunks incongruously wrapped in festive, tinkling Christmas lights. It all felt so bright, so cheerful, so utterly disconnected from the cold, dark business that had brought me to the sun-drenched paradise. It was a beautiful lie. David had arranged for a black town car to pick us up from the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. The leather seats were cool against my skin. Beside me sat David, looking impeccable and dangerous in a dark charcoal suit, his face set like stone. On his other side was a woman he introduced as Maria Sanchez, a professional notary public who, he had explained, specialized in contentious situations and had the calm demeanor of a bomb disposal expert. We were a somber, silent trio, a team of executioners on our way to a party. We pulled up to Brenda and Kevin's house at precisely 7 o'clock in the evening. It was a sprawling, terracotta-roofed Mac mansion nestled in the hills with a view of the city lights below. Every window was blazing with warm, inviting light. We could hear the faint sound of laughter and classic Christmas music drifting through the perfectly still desert air. The place looked like a Christmas card, a perfect picture of wealth, family, and happiness. It made me sick to my stomach. This was the house my money had helped buy, the life my sacrifices had funded. "Ready, Art?" David asked, his voice calm and steady, cutting through my thoughts. I took a deep breath, my hand tightening on the worn leather handle of my briefcase. It felt as heavy as a case of ammunition. "Let's go." We walked up the winding stone pathway, the crunch of our dress shoes on the gravel the only sound. The air smelled of jasmine and something roasting. I pressed the doorbell.
The chimes played a cheerful melodic tune, a sickeningly sweet prelude to the chaos we were about to unleash. For a moment, the heavy, ornate wooden doors swung open, and there stood Kevin, a crystal glass of eggnog in his hand, a stupid festive sweater stretched across his soft belly. His practiced host's smile faltered the moment he saw me. "Art," he stammered, his eyes widening in genuine shock. What are you doing here? Brenda said you weren't coming." His eyes flicked past me to the imposing figures of David and Maria, and the confusion on his face curdled into pure, undiluted alarm. "Who are these people?" he asked, his voice a nervous squeak. "Merry Christmas, Kevin," I said, my voice pleasant and even, a chilling counterpoint to the storm brewing inside me. "I decided to come after all, and I brought some friends to help us with a little family business." Before he could object, before he could slam the door in my face, I stepped past him, over the threshold and into the grand two-story foyer. David and Maria followed, their presence silent and imposing. The house smelled of roasted turkey, pine needles, and money. In the cavernous living room to our left, I could see Kevin's parents sitting on a massive white leather sofa, their faces masks of polite confusion. His sister was chasing her two young children around a lavishly decorated Christmas tree that was so large that almost touched the vaulted ceiling. The whole scene was a perfect, sickening tableau of the family-only Christmas I had been so cruelly excluded from.
Then Brenda emerged from the direction of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a pristine white apron, a hostess smile plastered on her face. The smile dissolved the second she saw me. Her face cycled through a series of emotions in a split second, utter shock, then a flash of pure fury, then a desperate, panicked attempt at composure. "Dad!" she exclaimed, her voice a high-pitched, brittle thing that sounded like glass about to shatter. "What a surprise! What are you doing here? I told you we were—" "Family only," I finished for her, setting my briefcase down on a marble-topped table with a definitive thud. "Yes, I remember. But as it turns out, I have some urgent family business to discuss. And what better time than Christmas, when we're all together?" From the top of the grand, sweeping staircase, I saw a flicker of movement. It was Chloe, my granddaughter, her eyes wide with shock and a dawning, terrified understanding. I gave her the smallest, almost imperceptible wink. Her presence, her quiet courage, gave me the strength I needed. "Perhaps we should talk in the study," Brenda hissed, grabbing my arm, her manicured fingers digging into my coat like talons. Her real estate agent smile was back, but it was a ghastly, stretched thing that didn't reach her terrified eyes. I pulled my arm away from her grasp, my patience finally gone. "Oh, there's no need for privacy, Brenda," I said, my voice ringing out through the suddenly quiet house, silencing the music and the laughter. "After all, we're all family here, aren't we?" I opened my briefcase with a loud, deliberate snap that echoed in the foyer. "Let's start by talking about your Christmas gift, the one at Lake Powell." The moment I said Lake Powell, the festive atmosphere in the room didn't just evaporate, it shattered. The soft Christmas music was still playing from some hidden speaker, but against the sudden, crushing silence, it sounded like a funeral dirge. Kevin's parents, who had been smiling politely, now stared, their smiles frozen and grotesque on their faces. Kevin himself looked like he was about to be physically sick, his face turning a pasty shade of gray. And Brenda's face was a pale, tight mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice shaking with the effort to keep it steady. She took a step towards me, trying to regain control of the situation, of the narrative. "Dad, you're confused. You're not well. You shouldn't have traveled all this way. You're clearly having an episode." "Oh, I'm perfectly well, Brenda," I said calmly, reaching into my briefcase and pulling out the first document. I held it up for all to see. "I have a letter here from Dr. Evans, my personal physician for the last 20 years. It's dated last week.
It confirms, after a full cognitive and physical examination, that I am in excellent physical and mental health. It states, and I quote, "Mr. Miller's cognitive functions are exceptionally sharp for a man of any age." Would you like me to read the full 3 pages aloud for your family? Kevin's mother, a woman named Sharon, who was draped in pearls, spoke up nervously, her voice a thin whisper. "Perhaps we should give you all some privacy." "No, please stay," David Chen said, stepping forward. His voice was not loud, but it had a quality of command that cut through the tension and made everyone turn to look at him. His piercing, intelligent gaze turned on Brenda, who flinched as if struck. "Mrs. Miller, my name is David Chen. I am your father's legal counsel. I am here tonight to formally serve you with this." He produced a thick, crisp envelope from his own briefcase and placed it firmly on the marble table next to mine. The sound was like a gavel falling. "This is a legally filed revocation of power of attorney. Any and all authority you fraudulently obtained over your father's affairs has been terminated, effective yesterday morning. A copy has been sent to all his financial institutions. Any attempt to access his accounts or act on his behalf from this moment forward will be considered a criminal offense and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." A collective gasp went through the room. Chloe, still on the stairs, brought her hand to her mouth. Brenda stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake, coiled and ready to strike. "This is insane," she whispered, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an ally and finding only shocked, accusing faces. She turned to me, her voice rising to a desperate plea. "Dad, you can't do this. I was trying to help you. I was protecting your assets." "Help me?" I shot back, my own voice finally rising with the righteous anger I had suppressed for weeks. "Were you helping me when you used that fraudulent document to wire $750,000 out of my retirement account without my knowledge?" The number, spoken aloud, hung in the air, huge and ugly and undeniable. Kevin sank into a nearby armchair, his face the color of ash, his head in his hands. "Were you helping me when you bought a luxury vacation home with my life savings and then lied to my friends and neighbors, telling them it was a generous gift from your doddering old father?" I continued, my voice growing stronger with each truth I spoke, each word a hammer blow against her lies. Brenda opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was trapped, exposed under the bright, festive lights of her stolen life, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The notary, Maria, stepped forward, her voice professional and clear, adding another layer of official finality to the proceedings. "I can attest that I have notarized Mr. Miller's signature on the revocation document, and I have reviewed the preliminary financial records provided by his counsel. The wire transfer for the Arizona property is a matter of public record." The perfect Christmas party had devolved into a courtroom drama, and Brenda was the defendant, tried and convicted in her own living room. The carefully constructed facade of her life was cracking, and I was about to take a sledgehammer to the rest of it. She thought this was the worst of it. She had no idea how much deeper her deception went, and how much irrefutable proof I had brought with me to this festive slaughter. Brenda, finally finding her voice, turned on me with the fury of a cornered animal, her desperation making her reckless. "You gave me access. You signed the papers. You were happy to have me manage things because you can't handle them anymore. You're old and you're forgetting things." "I signed papers you told me were for medical emergencies," I retorted, my voice booming in the now deadly silent room, each word a cannon shot. "I signed them because I trusted my daughter, a mistake I now realize I will regret for the rest of my life. But my memory is just fine, Brenda. In fact, I remember everything." My gaze swept across the room, deliberately landing on Kevin's horrified parents, who looked like they wanted the floor to swallow them whole. But this was never just about money, was it? It was about getting rid of me. I turned my full attention back to Brenda,
whose face was now a blotchy mask of rage and fear. "Tell me, sweetheart, were you also helping me when you called my VFW commander, John Henderson, to tell him I was losing my mind? To try and plant the seeds of my incompetence with my oldest friends?" This new accusation landed like a physical blow. It was one thing to steal from a father she thought was isolated. It was another to be exposed for trying to poison his friendships. Kevin's father, a stoic-looking man named Robert, who I knew had served in the Navy, finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "Brenda, is that true?" Before she could spit out another lie, a new voice joined the conversation, calm and authoritative. "Yes, sir, it is." From the doorway, where he had been standing quietly, just out of sight, John Henderson stepped into the room. I had flown him out as my final, unimpeachable witness. He was still wearing his VFW post commander's blazer, adorned with his service ribbons, his presence radiating a quiet, unshakable integrity that made Brenda's frantic deceptions look even more pathetic. Her jaw dropped. She looked as if she had seen a ghost. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," John said, addressing Kevin's parents with a respectful but firm nod. "My name is John Henderson. I've known Art for 15 years. He is one of the sharpest, most honorable men I have ever had the privilege to know. Your daughter-in-law called me 2 weeks ago. She tried to convince me that Art was mentally incompetent, that he was a danger to himself. She was fishing for information, for anecdotes she could twist and use against him to build a case that he needed to be managed." Kevin's father, a stoic-looking man named Robert, who I knew had served in the Navy, finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "Brenda, is that true?" Before she could spit out another lie, a new voice joined the conversation, calm and authoritative. "Yes, sir, it is." From the doorway, where he had been standing quietly, just out of sight, John Henderson stepped into the room. I had flown him out as my final, unimpeachable witness. He was still wearing his VFW post commander's blazer, adorned with his service ribbons, his presence radiating a quiet, unshakable integrity that made Brenda's frantic deceptions look even more pathetic. Her jaw dropped. She looked as if she had seen a ghost. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," John said, addressing Kevin's parents with a respectful but firm nod. "My name is John Henderson. I've known Art for 15 years. He is one of the sharpest, most honorable men I have ever had the privilege to know. Your daughter-in-law called me 2 weeks ago. She tried to convince me that Art was mentally incompetent, that he was a danger to himself. She was fishing for information, for anecdotes she could twist and use against him, to build a case that he needed to be managed." Kevin's mother, Sharon, put a hand to her mouth, a small, horrified sound escaping her lips. "But it gets worse," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. I pressed play on a recording. My own voice filled the room, but it was a voice I didn't recognize. I had deliberately made it sound old, frail, and confused. It was a call I had made to Brenda just 2 days ago, pretending to be panicked about a bank statement. Her voice, dripping with a sickeningly false sympathy, came through the phone's speaker clear as a bell. "Oh, Dad, don't you worry your head about that. It's all so complicated. That's why I'm taking care of it for you now. You just rest. In fact, I found a wonderful place, a community called Sunshine Meadows, where you wouldn't have to worry about a single thing." I stopped the recording and looked at her. "Sunshine Meadows," I said quietly, letting the name hang in the air. "A memory care facility. She was already shopping for a place to put me, a place to dump me after she had drained every last penny from my name." David Chen stepped forward again, his timing impeccable. "We have also documented Mrs. Miller's attempts to have herself named as the sole beneficiary on Mr. Miller's life insurance policy, and her illegal access of his private medical records through his online patient portal. The evidence of a deliberate, malicious, and systematic campaign of elder financial abuse is overwhelming and, frankly, shocking." That was it, the final nail in the coffin of her lies. The truth,
in all its ugly, undeniable, and meticulously documented detail, was laid bare on the pristine white carpet of Brenda's living room. Her perfect life, her perfect party, her perfect family, all of it was a sham, bought and paid for with treachery. Thank you all for sticking with me through that. It's hard to relive, even now, to speak those words and remember that level of betrayal. If you've made it this far into my story, please just type the number 1 in the comments so I know you're still here with me on this journey. Your support means more than you know. Now, for the final act of that terrible night. The room was a vortex of shame and disbelief. The air was thick with it. Kevin's sister had quietly herded her now crying children into a back room, closing the door on the ugly scene. Her parents looked at their daughter-in-law as if they were a complete stranger, a monster they had somehow welcomed into their family. Kevin himself was still slumped in the armchair, staring at the floor, a broken, pathetic man who had allowed his wife's greed to pilot them straight into an iceberg. And Brenda was just standing there, a statue of shattered pride, the ugly truth of her actions exposed for all to see, a stain that would never wash out. Amid the wreckage, my granddaughter, Chloe, who had been watching the entire horror show from the stairs, slowly walked down. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, but she held her head high. She didn't go to her mother. She didn't go to her father. She walked straight to me, her young face streaked with tears, and wrapped her arms around my waist, burying her face in my jacket. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa," she sobbed, her small body trembling. I held her tight, my own eyes burning. This was the only thing that mattered. This brave, wonderful girl. "You have nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart. You are the bravest one here. You are the only one who told the truth." I looked over her head, my gaze locking with Brenda's, then Kevin's, and I said, my voice clear and firm, a declaration of my final victory, "And for the record, I have already taken steps to secure Chloe's future, a future that neither of you will ever be able to touch or corrupt." David Chen stepped forward again, his timing as always impeccable, stepped forward with the final document from his briefcase. It was thick, bound in a blue legal cover. He held it up for all to see. "Mr. Miller has established the Chloe Miller Irrevocable Trust," he announced to the silent, stunned room. As of 3 days ago, all of Mr. Miller's remaining assets, including his properties in Illinois and Florida, his investment portfolio, and his cash accounts, have been legally transferred into this trust. It will be administered by my firm, Chen and Associates. He looked directly at Brenda and Kevin, his eyes as cold and hard as obsidian. "The trust has one very specific, legally binding condition. You, Brenda, and Kevin Miller are explicitly and permanently prohibited from acting as trustees, beneficiaries, or having any control or influence whatsoever over the distribution of its funds. You will not see a single dime. Your daughter's future is protected. From you." Chloe gasped, pulling back to look up at me, her tear-filled eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning relief. "Grandpa, really?"
"Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair. It was the first genuine Christmas gift I had given in years, and it was the most important one of my life. I was not just giving her money, I was giving her freedom. Freedom from the greed and manipulation that had so thoroughly poisoned her parents. I was giving her a choice, a future that was entirely her own. Brenda finally snapped, the last vestiges of her composure shattering. "You can't do that!" she shrieked, her voice raw and ugly with greed. "That's our money! That's our daughter!" "It was never your money, Brenda," I said quietly, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "It was my money, and my mother's money, earned over a lifetime of hard work. And as for your daughter, she has a choice to be with family who loves her for who she is, not for what she can provide." The stage was set. The protections were in place. My granddaughter was safe. Now it was time to deliver my ultimatum. The fight had gone out of them. Brenda's shriek had been a final, desperate burst of defiance, the last gasp of a dying queen. But now she just stood there, deflated and trembling.
The reality of her situation, the sheer, crushing totality of her defeat, was beginning to sink in. I had taken back control. I had protected Chloe. I had exposed her for the predator she was in front of the very people she sought to impress. Now I would dictate the terms of her surrender. I looked from Brenda's pale, tear-streaked face to Kevin's ashen one. He couldn't even meet my eyes. He just stared at the intricate pattern on their absurdly expensive Persian rug. "This is what happens now," I said, my voice low and steady, each word carefully chosen and delivered like a judge passing sentence. There would be no negotiation. There would be no discussion. There would be only acceptance or ruin. You have two options. I held up one finger, my old wrinkled hand steady. Option 1. You do nothing. You fight this. You hire a lawyer and try to claim I'm incompetent, just as you planned. If you choose this path, David will file the civil lawsuit for fraud, theft, and restitution tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Simultaneously, he will walk our entire file, the financial records, the sworn affidavits from my friends, the recordings of your conversations, everything, into the Maricopa County District Attorney's Office. We will be recommending prosecution for multiple felonies, including elder financial abuse, grand theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Given the mountain of evidence we have, a conviction is not just likely, it is almost certain. You will both face significant prison time. Your assets will be seized to pay for damages, your reputations will be utterly destroyed, and you will lose any legal right to see Chloe. That is your first option. I let the weight of that sink into the thick, silent air. I could see the terror blooming in Kevin's eyes. His parents looked physically ill. His mother, Sharon, was openly weeping now. Or, I continued, holding up a second finger, option 2. Option 2 is your only path to staying out of a courtroom and a prison cell. It is your only chance to salvage any shred of a future. I paused, making sure I had their complete, undivided attention. First, you will put the house at Lake Powell on the market tomorrow. You will sell it to the first reasonable offer. You will return the full $750,000 to an account designated by my lawyer within 30 days, not a penny less. Second, you will both sign a legally binding confession of your actions, acknowledging the fraud and the theft and permanently relinquishing any and all claims to my estate now or in the future. This document will be held by my lawyer. Third, you will both enroll in and attend weekly therapy sessions with a therapist of my choosing for a minimum of 2 years. I will require notarized proof of attendance every month. Fourth, you will write a formal, sincere letter of apology to John Henderson and the members of my VFW post for the lies you told and the slander you attempted. David will approve the letter before you send it. I took a step closer, my eyes locked on Brenda, making sure she understood the final, most important term. And finally, you will not again interfere in my relationship with my granddaughter. If Chloe chooses to spend time with me, to come live with me, you will not stand in her way. You will not guilt her, threaten her, or manipulate her. Any attempt to poison her against me will render this agreement null and void, and I will proceed with criminal charges without a moment's hesitation. Do you understand these terms? The room was so quiet, you could hear the ice melting in the abandoned eggnog glasses on the coffee table. It was a complete and total capitulation I was demanding. I was not just asking for my money back, I was demanding accountability. I was demanding they confront the ugliness of what they had done and begin the long, arduous process of becoming decent human beings again. You have 24 hours to have your lawyer call my lawyer with your answer, I said, turning to leave. I picked up my briefcase. It's job now done. But I would advise you to think very carefully, because this is the only offer of mercy you will ever get from me. I looked at Chloe, who was still standing beside me, her hand gripping mine tightly as if she were my only anchor in this storm. Let's go, sweetheart.
We have a flight to catch. The choice was theirs now. Public ruin or private shame. Either way, their reign of terror and their perfect gilded Christmas was over. Chloe and I didn't speak on the way to the hotel David had booked for us. The silence in the car wasn't awkward. It was a shared space of exhaustion and relief. She just held my hand, her small grip a lifeline in the turbulent sea of my emotions, and I held hers back, a silent promise that she was no longer alone in that house of lies. We checked into a beautiful suite at a quiet resort, a world away from the emotional carnage we had just left behind. The suite overlooked the city lights of Phoenix, a glittering, indifferent carpet spread out below us. The sterile luxury of the room with its crisp white linens and minimalist art was a stark contrast to the messy, emotional chaos of the evening. After we ordered room service, a large pizza and 2 Cokes for her and a stiff scotch for me, Chloe finally looked at me, her eyes, usually so full of teenage life, now old with a sadness that no 15-year-old should ever have to carry. "Are they going to go to jail, Grandpa?" she asked, her voice small. "That depends on them, sweetheart," I answered honestly, taking a sip of my drink. The scotch burned a welcome trail down my throat. My phone, which I had placed on the polished granite of the wet bar, started buzzing, a harsh, insistent sound. The screen lit up with Brenda's name. I looked at it, then at Chloe. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately, a frantic, desperate summons. This time I answered, pressing the speakerphone button so Chloe could hear whatever came next. This was her life too, and she deserved to hear the unvarnished truth.
It was Kevin's voice, strained and broken. The voice of a man whose world had crumbled in the space of an hour. "Art, please don't do this. Please just talk to us." "The terms are not negotiable, Kevin," I said, my voice cold and flat. There was no anger left, just a vast, weary emptiness. I know," he stammered, his words tumbling over each other. "It's just, she's a wreck. She's completely falling apart. We agree. We'll do it. We'll do everything you said. Just, please." "Put her on the phone," I commanded. There was a shuffling sound, the phone being passed from one trembling hand to another, and then Brenda's voice, thick with ragged hysterical sobs, filled the room. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know who I became. After Mom died, I panicked. I saw everything you had, and I was so scared for our future, for Chloe's future." "So, you decided to secure your future by stealing mine," I cut her off, the anger, which I thought was gone, flaring again like a banked fire. "By planning to lock me away in a home? Was that part of your grand plan to secure Chloe's future?" "No, I mean, yes, but it got out of control," she wailed, her words a pathetic mix of confession and excuse. "I never would have actually— Dad, please, don't take Chloe away from me. She's all I have, and my real estate license, it's my whole career. I'll be ruined. I'll have nothing." The excuses, the self-pity, it was nauseating. "Your career?" I said, my voice dripping with scorn I didn't bother to hide. "You are a licensed professional who used her intimate knowledge of contracts and finance to systematically defraud her own elderly father. You are lucky you are not facing disbarment and a prison sentence. You will resign your license, Brenda. That is a non-negotiable part of you demonstrating that you understand the gravity of your actions. You abused a position of trust. You will not be given the chance to do it to anyone else." There was a choked sob on the other end, a sound of utter defeat. "You had a choice, Brenda," I continued, my voice softening slightly, not out of pity for her, but for the sake of the listening child in the room. "You could have been a daughter. You could have been family. You chose to be a predator. These are the consequences. My lawyer will expect a call from your lawyer in the morning with your formal, unconditional acceptance of all terms. If he does not receive that call by noon, he will proceed as planned. Goodbye." I hung up the phone and looked at my granddaughter. Her face was a canvas of conflicting emotions: pain for her parents, relief for herself, and a profound sadness for the family she had lost. "You did the right thing, Grandpa," she whispered, her voice certain. I pulled her into a hug, her small frame feeling so fragile. "I know, sweetheart, but it doesn't feel good." In that quiet hotel room, miles from the wreckage of the Christmas dinner, we were two survivors charting a course for a new, unknown future. The war was over, but now came the long, difficult task of rebuilding a life from the rubble. The first week of the new year in Chicago was brutally cold. The wind off Lake Michigan was a physical force that seemed to cut right through your coat. But my small, quiet apartment felt warmer than it had in years. It was no longer just my apartment. It was ours. Chloe, after a long, difficult conversation with a court-appointed child advocate and a family court judge in Arizona, had made her choice. The judge, after reviewing a summary of the overwhelming evidence David had prepared, had made it abundantly clear to Brenda and Kevin that he would not hesitate to grant me full custody if they violated any of my terms or put up any fight whatsoever. So, a temporary arrangement was made. Chloe would finish the school year in Scottsdale, living with her now humbled and closely monitored parents, but she would spend the entire summer with me in Chicago, with the option to make the move permanent if she chose. Her presence, even for just this extended winter break, had transformed the space. Her vibrant, artistic photographs of desert landscapes and city skylines now hung on the walls, breathing life into the beige paint. The sound of her laughter, a sound I didn't realize how much I'd missed, filled the rooms that had been silent for too long, chasing away the ghosts of my loneliness. We fell into a comfortable, easy routine. I'd make her breakfast, pancakes were her favorite, before she attended her online classes to keep up with her schoolwork. In the afternoons, we'd bundle up and go for walks along the frozen lakefront, visit the Art Institute, or I'd teach her how to play chess. It was a game of strategy and consequences, a game of protecting your king while methodically dismantling your opponent's defenses. It felt particularly relevant. Exactly 30 days after that fateful Christmas Eve, a registered courier delivered a large, stiff envelope to my door. My hands were steady as I signed for it. I knew what it was. I sat down at my kitchen table with Chloe beside me, a silent partner in all of this. Inside, there were several documents. The first was a cashier's check, drawn from a Scottsdale bank, for the amount of $750,000, plus a precisely calculated amount for interest. Holding it felt strange. Not triumphant, just final. The second was a legally executed copy of the confession and relinquishment of claims, signed in two different, shaky hands by Brenda and Kevin. The third was a copy of Brenda's formal resignation, filed with and accepted by the Arizona Department of Real Estate. They had met every demand. There were also two handwritten letters, enclosed in a separate smaller envelope. Kevin's was short, the handwriting of a man humbled. "I have no excuse, Art. I saw what was happening, and I was too weak and too greedy to stop it. I failed you, I failed my wife, and I failed my daughter. I have started therapy, alone. I hope one day to earn Chloe's respect back." Brenda's was longer, more rambling, the pages tear-stained in places. It started with a litany of excuses and justifications about her fears and anxieties, but the tone shifted in the final paragraph. "Last night, I was cleaning out a closet, and I found a box of old photos. There was one of me about 5 years old, standing on your feet, dancing with you at a wedding. You looked so happy, so proud. I don't know when I lost that little girl, the one who adored her father. I don't know when she was replaced by this person, this monster of greed.
I'm not going to therapy because you told me to. I'm going because I need to find out how to kill this monster I've become before it consumes what's left of my soul. I am sorry, Dad. For everything.
I set the letters down. Chloe looked at me, her young eyes searching my face. Do you believe her, Grandpa? I thought for a long moment, the letters feeling heavy in my hand. I don't know, sweetheart, I said honestly. It doesn't matter as much as I thought it would. My focus is no longer on their redemption, but on her eyes. And in that moment, I knew it was true. The money was back, the legal battles were over, but the real victory wasn't in any of that. It was right here, in this small, warm kitchen, with this wonderful, brave young woman who was the true keeper of my family's legacy. So that's my story. It's not a story about revenge, not really. The revenge was just the mechanism for justice, the loud, messy explosion that was necessary to clear the rubble. The real story is about what comes after the storm. It's about rebuilding. It's about the painful, quiet discovery that family isn't always about the blood you share, but about the loyalty, trust, and love you earn day after day. My life isn't what I planned when I was a young man, or even what I envisioned 5 years ago. But in a way, it's richer. I have a relationship with my granddaughter built on a foundation of unshakable truth and mutual respect. I have my friends at the VFW, my community, who stood by me without question. I have my dignity, which I fought to reclaim. Brenda and Kevin are walking their long, private road. They make their therapy appointments. They send polite, distant emails with updates. Maybe one day they'll find their way back to being decent people. Maybe. But I'm no longer waiting by the phone for an apology that will make everything right again. My life is here, now. It's in the smell of pancakes on a Saturday morning with Chloe, the satisfying click of chess pieces on a board, the quiet peace of knowing that I am safe, and more importantly, that she is safe. The sweetest revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building a life so full of joy and purpose that you barely remember they exist. My victory wasn't in that opulent living room in Scottsdale. My victory is every single morning I wake up and hear Chloe's laughter down the hall. That's the only inheritance that truly matters. Thank you for listening to my story. I truly appreciate you spending your time with me. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to fight a battle you never expected with your own family? What did you learn from it? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories matter, and they help us all feel a little less alone. Thank you.